Hello, everyone, and welcome to Modern Mentoring. I am your host, Lonnie Phillips. Come on in. I want you to know we are multicasting across multiple platforms today. We're across LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So please come on in. I know you are transitioning from various meetings and different things happening in your day. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes to allow you time to settle in. But oh, I'm so excited about today. Come on in. And those of you that are dialing in, I want you to type in the chat today and use the chat to communicate with us. Find 2 words to describe how your day is going. Why don't you type that in the chat for me so I can see how your day is going? Hi, Lisa. So glad you could join. So glad you could be here. I miss you. Type in the chat 2 words that describe how your day is going. We're going to give it a few more minutes and allow people to join so we can introduce you to our special guest today. I'm excited to share her with you. All right, productive and relaxing. Wow, that's a good one. All right. I will say my 2 words today for how my day is going. It's been hectic. But it's been exciting because I was looking forward to Modern Mentoring. Oh, I've got a few friends out here. Hi, Lori. Thanks for joining. Liliana, Lorena, Dale, Pooja. Hello there, Rick. Who else I got out there? Sunisha, Mary. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you all. Type in 2 words in our chat today about what kind of day you're having. I see empowering and exhausting, busy, fun, productive. Someone says, me too, hectic. I've had a hectic day. Lisa says, joyful and productive. Zainab, hello there. Chaotic and optimistic. A bit exhausted. I know that feeling. Hello there, Rodrigo. Welcome, welcome. So glad to have you all. Love seeing you all out there. Why don't you also type in the chat where you're calling in from? Would love to know what cities you all are in today. Now that we're all kind of virtual and some of us are back to traveling, I'd love to know where you are. I'm sitting here in Chicago today. Destiny says hectic and hopeful. All right now, I love that. The hopeful part especially. So thanks for sharing that. Helped a friend with her business. It was awesome to support an amazing person. Oh, supportive and empowering. I love that. Joni says optimistic and super busy in Kirkland, Washington. Hello there, Lorena. I was in Covington, Washington. Vishnu, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that. Productive and exciting. Diane is in Scottsdale. We see a lot of people in the house from the Seattle, Washington area, vacationing in Vail, Colorado. Hello there. Hello, Mr. Christopher Cost. So glad to see you. Santosh, awesome and a great day ahead. Awesome. I love it. I love it. Keep it coming. I love that energy in chat. And as we continue today, I want to make sure that throughout our conversation that you all continue to use that chat to make sure you connect with me and our special guests. I want to go ahead and get started and let you all know who are joining for the first time that when I think about modern mentoring, I am your host, Lonnie Phillips, for those of you who did not hear that. The spirit of this was really to create community. I wanted to create a community of mentees and mentors that we support one another as we're trying to figure out how to navigate this corporate journey that a lot of us are on. And I really want to give everyone an opportunity to either be a student or a teacher, because whether you're a mentee or a mentor, you have an opportunity to do both. But what's most important is that we create a safe space for us to be able to have real conversations, to talk about what our challenges are, and to be there to support one another. And it was just my way day of trying to figure out in this new world, how do we scale our mentoring efforts? Because there just was not enough hours in the day. And I just decided to invite a few of my favorite people along to have a conversation with in hopes of really helping all of you be able to just navigate this corporate space a little bit better, help you work through some challenges, give you some tools and resources to help you be more successful. But today, we are here to talk about practical guidance to being and building allies. I know many of you out there today are either questioning, how can I be a better ally? Some of you have encountered situations and you probably thought, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this situation, or I keep encountering this. How do I navigate it a little bit better? Well, today is going to be all about helping you with practical guidance of helping you understand how to be an ally and to also how do I show up differently in being an ally and how do I garner more people to support me and be an ally. I think that is going to be even more important as we think about the world of work that we're in today. We just want to make sure that we are supporting one another, and not everybody's going to get it right all the time. And you know what? That's okay. Fail fast, learn quick. That's part of having a growth mindset. I want us to be able to talk about those difficult situations and what we're going to learn from it. So let me jump in and introduce you to our special guest today, Miss Gavriella Schuster. Let me read her bio, which it is a small, brief version of all the things she has accomplished. She's a former corporate vice president at Microsoft. Gavriella reimagined the Global Partner Program, growing it into a powerhouse with more than 90,000 cloud services partners and over 12,000 published marketplace solutions. She is a visionary and mission-focused executive and a public company director with broad influence on the leading edge of technology-enabled business innovation, and also a champion of DE&I as a TEDx speaker, launching the Pound Become and Pound Allies platform. She is a founding executive, sponsor, and board advisor of the Women in Tech Network and Women in Cloud, as well as serving on the boards of the Women Business Collaborative and She Community, and as a strategic advisor for the Berkshire Partners private equity firm, Open Systems Board, and Chinasoft's International Board. Now, I call her an incredible friend, mentor, sponsor, champion for women, and a freaking powerhouse. Welcome, Miss Gavriella Schuster.
Well, thank you, honey. It's great to see you all. I recognize many names from the chat, and I'm glad you could join us today.
Yes, let's see a couple people out there. Hello, Gavriella. They all speaking to you out there. So, all right, Miss Gavriella, let's give it to the people. How about that? All right. So let's jump right in. Let's start with how you define allyship.
So allyship is when you make an intentional decision to take your place of privilege and to confer that onto another individual, to empower them and give them space to feel connected, belonging, and value in whatever space you're in.
Okay. So, how would you break that word down? How do you break down allies? Because I know you have a simple way of how you approach it.
Yeah. So, I'm a very action-oriented person.
Yeah.
And so, what I found throughout my career and the times that I've been coaching and working with people is that it is hard in the moment to remember what you should do. And what does it mean? So I took the word allies and I said, if you need to remember something, remember these 6 letters and the words behind them. So A is for being an advocate. L is for listening. The second L is to lift up those around you, to include, to elevate, and to sponsor each of the individuals. And so when you think about what does it mean to be an ally will do those things every day. And they will work to bring people into empowerment.
Wow, I love that. So I'm going to take the audience a little bit later into some specific scenarios that we're going to talk through. But before I do that, I want to make sure that we all anchor on this. Can we be an ally and need an ally?
Yes, we can. And what I found is the fastest way to build your allies is to be an ally, because you want to represent, you want to model the behavior that you want from others as well. And and so when you step into allyship, all of those behaviors that I talked about are behaviors of a leader. And so you're also stepping into leadership and you're learning more about how to be a leader. So you can absolutely be an ally and still need an ally, because you can still be in that space where you feel alone and you need someone to bring you back into that conversation, or you need someone to recognize that someone else just dissed you. Somebody else just had some sort of microaggression that, took away your empowerment, and they need to bring it back so that you can be re-empowered.
Absolutely. How many of us have been in that situation in the moment where you just feel like, wait a minute, all my power, you either gave them your power or your power was taken from you. And you just feel helpless and you just need to get your footing. And it's just nice to have someone who could be there that will have your back and be able to support you through those difficult times. Now, what is the best way to build your allies? Do you have some strategies you can share with the group?
Yeah. So, actually, one of the best ways to build allies is to take those moments where somebody did something that did kind of pull the rug out from under you. That through many times, most times, unconsciously, they did something that disempowered you. And when you go and you have a conversation about that, and you talk about what did that feel like to you, and what happened, and what they could have done differently to support you in that moment, you will that's the way you build allies. I mean, it may feel counterintuitive to talk to somebody who you feel like maybe isn't a great ally, but having that conversation in not a blaming way and not a shaming way, but in a way that is just very honest, authentic, and real on what happened and how it could have been different, and your ask for the future, right? So many people are afraid to ask for what they need. If you want to build allies, you have to be clear and you have to ask for what you need.
Woo! And it takes courage, Gavriella,
Yeah.
to have that conversation after you feel like you've been dissed or where you feel like you've been disrespected. It
Yep.
takes courage like you do not believe to have to come back and have that conversation with a person without making them feel like they're being blamed for something or to shame them in that moment, but to share with them the impact that whatever that was had on you. All right, let's make it real for everyone.
Okay.
So
Yes.
let's talk through a scenario. So scenario one, what if you're in a meeting when someone totally ignores what you said? I'm sure no one on this call has. Or how about this one? Or someone repeats what you said and gets credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
How
Mm-hmm.
should you handle that using your 6-step method?
Yeah. So okay, first of all, those things they happen to me all the time. And they happen to you all the time, Lonnie.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
So I
ma'am.
think one of the first things that you all have to recognize is that it is not you.
Yes.
So it wasn't personal and it isn't you.
Yeah.
It is something that somebody did like totally unconsciously. It's one of those microaggressions that people do totally unconsciously. It does happen to women more often, that they get interrupted, that what they'll say something, and I don't know, whatever it is, like the pitch of the room, it's just not heard, or it's totally ignored, and then someone else says it, and suddenly everyone hears it and thinks it's a great idea, right?
Yeah.
And so there's two things. The first thing is, what do you do when it happens to you and you don't have an ally in the room, right? And so, you know, that's where I've learned a bunch of tactics myself, right? So if I'm interrupted and I haven't finished, saying something like, I know, like you have a lot of great thoughts on this, and I want to hear those too. Can I just finish what I was going to say? Right.
Yeah.
And then if somebody says something that you said and you don't have an ally in the room, you can say, that is an awesome, awesome idea. I love it. And then you add on to it because it was your idea. And
Right.
so you can add on to it more than anyone else can, because you actually know the next chapter of what you were going to say, whereas they didn't.
Or
Right?
without anyway. Yes.
So you kind of just take the power back, right? But if you have an ally, this is why it's important to have those allies, because it can sound defensive for you to do those things, for you to say that. When you have an ally, the ally would say, you know what, Joe, real excited to hear what you have to say, but I think, Gavriella, were you done? Right? And so it's not blaming, it's not shaming, it's just bringing the conversation back and being inclusive. If you have an ally and somebody repeats what you just said, then the ally can say, wow, Joe, that's a great, I love the idea, I love the concept. I think it's the same thing Gavriella was saying just a few minutes ago. Gavriella, what do you have more that you'd like to say about that?
Yes.
Right. And you can feel the difference, right? You can feel the difference of if you have to say it or if you have an ally who's willing to step in and say that. They're not rescuing you, they are empowering you. And so it's just helping somebody. So like in this case, if afterwards you went to Joe and you said, hey Joe, that was great meeting, like loved the conversation, loved where we ended up. There was a couple things that would have made it even better, I think, right? Because I felt like you and I weren't on the same page.
I love that. So let's go back to when you started it and you were being interrupted, and it was about still acknowledging they have some great points to make, but you wanted to finish your thought.
Yeah.
I've seen that executed so many different ways. I've seen it done respectfully, which is what you did. I've seen it done disrespectfully. It's like, I haven't finished my point yet.
Especially the hand. Like if you get the hand, like that's not respectful.
You know, and usually that comes from frustration, right? And in a virtual world where we're all doing it now via technology, it can be tough as well.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we address that. How would you do it if someone has taken the floor and you were talking, so they stepped over you? How would you deal with that in a virtual scenario?
You know, in a virtual scenario, it's very similar. I mean, I don't want to also be an offender, right? So I'm going to wait. I'm not going to interrupt them again, right? So if somebody interrupted me and they started talking, I'm going to wait, and then I'm going to say, you know, I agree with this, and this, and just so if I could just finish what I was saying, this is what else I would add to it.
Okay, I love that. And then sometimes I've seen people add into the chat, say, hey, I didn't get a chance to finish my point, and then they'll type it in the chat window.
Yep.
So I also like how you pivoted our conversation, because then you talked about how could an ally come forward in this moment? right? And
Yep.
so you talked about how the ally can advocate for you in subtle ways, which is not
Yes.
about rescuing, but just validating and empowering you
Yep.
for the point that you were making. So I bet we've got a number of people. Hi, Lorraine, I see you out there. I see people are really jumping onto the allyship point here. So let's jump over to microaggressions. You've already talked about it a little bit, but let's simplify the meaning for everyone before we jump into this next scenario. What does microaggression mean to you?
Yeah. So, microaggressions are very unconscious actions that occur where they are very small, they are very slight things, and generally only the person who kind of is attuned or sensitive will notice that, right? When it's directed at you, you notice it. Many other people in the room, they may not notice it. It may be culturally acceptable, whatever happened, right? It may be, but it's generally brought forth by some sort of unconscious bias, some assumption that person has about you because of the way that you look, the way that you act, something you just said, right? And so that's really what a microaggression is. And the more that we can take that and make it something from that being under the table, something that's on the table, something that's seen and heard and dealt with, then that is how we create and raise the overall consciousness of the room, of the people that we're working with. And by doing that, then you have the foundation to be able to start building allyship.
Absolutely. All right, so now let's make it real. We got a few scenarios that are real scenarios that have actually happened. So I don't want anyone to be shocked. All right. So you hear the comment, and I hear this a lot. When someone's trying to describe a person, usually a person who is diverse, okay, they'll say, they are so articulate.
Yeah.
Or you'll hear the joke it was harmless, although it was demeaning a certain race. Or you are just being too sensitive, even though what has been done was seen as very offensive. Or referring to a woman leader as bossy.
Mm-hmm.
Or telling someone, especially maybe a female or someone earlier in career, why don't you take the notes or go get us some coffee?
Yep.
How would you apply your 6-step method to any one of these scenarios? You pick the one that you want.
Well, those are all microaggressions, right? They are all based on there's some subtle, like subconscious bias someone has, and it just comes out the way that they talk, something they say. Like I've even had people, like when I said something when I was earlier in career, I'd say something smart, and people say, "Oh, you're one smart cookie." And I'm like, what? Like, okay. And so
Did you really have that facial expression when they said it, or did you hide it?
I think I know I had more of a poker face. I was
You
like,
did. See, I probably would have been the one for earlier in my career. I probably would have been the poker face, but I would have been trying to process it quickly. And I think as I've gotten, more seasoned, I probably would turn around and say, Where do you get that from?"
exactly. Exactly. No, I mean, and I think that's the thing, right? The thing is that the more seasoned you are, the more experienced you are, and the more you push yourself to actually start addressing these things yourself, and become an ally for other people. Because what I realized when I became a corporate vice president, right, with that title, what I realized was that it wasn't about me. It was about anything that happened to me or anything that happened in my presence. If I didn't address it,
Yeah,
then I was showing people it was okay.
that's right.
And it's not, right? So, all of those examples you gave, like let's go with the one where, like, you're in a meeting and even, like, say someone in the chat says something, like makes a joke. They think it's a joke, but it's actually very demeaning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you see that, right? You go, whoa. And yet you're like on a call, say with, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 people.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Right?
Hmm.
So let me ask you, if you had an ally, what would you want them to do?
Immediately call out the bad behavior and say that was inappropriate.
Yep. And if you didn't have an ally, sadly you were in that situation and you saw something and you thought, I cannot believe someone just said that. And you'd give it a minute, right? You'd give it a minute to like process and see if somebody else says something. Um, but if it feels like everyone just moves on, I think that's a teachable moment, right? That is the moment where you got to bring everybody back to it, and not in a defensive way, and again, not blaming or shaming, but kind of point it out. Don't you think?
Absolutely. That's so important. And sometimes I have found that it's hard to, in that moment, to hijack because you'll feel like you're hijacking the meeting to talk about it. But there is a way to say that's inappropriate and move on and then come back later
Right.
and
Right.
address it as a group so you can talk about it and have it as a teachable moment. But you kind of have to know your audience, and depends on, how senior you are in that scenario, if you can take back control over it. Because I've found in some meetings, there's no way to just take over because you're not owning the meeting, but you can address the inappropriate behavior, and then you can say, hey, we probably should talk about it later. But
Right.
it depends on the situation.
Right. But I mean, I think it is important and to create allies, and it is important to kind of at least bring it to the group,
Yeah.
right? You can
Yes.
you can do a lot more when you take it offline, you have a private conversation, but you want to just make awareness to the group. And I liken this a lot. The kind of allyship training is similar to what a lot of our children are getting in school, which is bystander training for bullies, right?
Hmm.
How do you teach children that it's not okay to stand by as somebody else is getting bullied? And even though these microaggressions, they're not to the extreme of bullying, right? But what you're helping people understand is the same thing, that if you see something, you should say something.
Absolutely. If you see something, say something. And please know that microaggressions compounded can feel like bullying over time,
They
right?
do, and they have the impact of eroding your confidence
They
and
really.
making you feel like it is you. It is something you've done. It's personal, right? And that is why my second L in allies is lift. It is about, how do you lift up those around you? How do you take the opportunity to point out things people are doing well? Because
Hmm.
again, that is a form of empowerment, and doing that in public, right? In that meeting, when you're saying something, if I've noticed that you are getting interrupted or other people are taking credit for what you say, and I'm your ally, I'm going to say, even I'm going to preempt it, and I'm going to say, Lonnie, I love what you're saying. Can you help us take that to another direction? Can you take it to the next level?
Right.
Right. And I'm going to say that even before anyone else even jumps in.
I love that. I love that. We actually have a question in the audience. But let me say this real quick before I jump to Pooja's question. They said, let's pause for a moment. Something showed up that needs our awareness. That might be another way an ally could speak up in a meeting when they see something appropriate. So thank you for that. But
Yeah.
Pooja said, any tips to make sure to stay away from company politics while in quest for allies?
Well, I mean, so so by the nature of these microaggressions or what might be happening, that is I guess you could call it politics, right? Because it's the culture of your organization. And what you're trying to do is shift the culture of your organization and create one that is more supportive and empowering, where people can feel belonging and feel valued. And so you are stepping into the politics. But what if what you're worried about is, that there's someone who's trying to make a name for themselves, and they're not, they are continually doing things like this, right? Then it's maybe not trying to go convert that person, right? They are on a mission of their own, doing their own thing. It's then bringing and building allies around you so that you are collectively together as those things happen, and it becomes clearer to that person that that wasn't a space where they should try and hijack the conversation, right? I'll give you a complete, a different example for me personally, right? One of the things that was always hard for me is if I was leading a meeting and there was like this person that would continually just go completely off topic, right? They would take in a different direction. Like you're trying to bring the group to a place and they go way off. And that was always so hard for me to do that, to bring that back in a respectful way, right? And I learned these words.
Okay.
Wow. Interesting point. I totally lost context for what you're talking about from where we were. Can you help me go from what we were talking about here to what you just mentioned, right? Typically, that person will go, okay, I'll take that offline. We can take that offline, right? Because then they realize I took a right turn.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And everyone in the room is like, yeah, are you going to keep taking this on a right turn, or are we going to come back to the road?
Now, you said this is the language. Did you at one point did not have the language? How did you handle it when you did not have the language?
Well, I mean, when I didn't have the language, I would just be like, well, that's you're way off topic, right? But that wasn't as respectful, right?
Right, right,
In giving that person the opportunity to, like, because maybe there was some connection that everyone just missed.
right. So
Right.
one of the things you just, I think, exhibited so beautifully is it's one of those moments when you're in the moment to not resist the urge to react quickly. Because if you react too quickly, then you get all emotional and then it may come out negative. And you're going to find that you're going to isolate the individual and you're not going to feel great about the experience you've just displayed in front of everyone. But I like how you said, I paused and I said, how do I think about bringing them in? Help me understand where the connection is, invites them into the conversation to help you understand without necessarily making them look so bad. So I
Right.
really like that because that's where we are trying to build allies as we go. It's okay for you to do you. Let's just, whatever that is, if you want to take us off topic, whatever. But it's my job to make sure that I set a great example as a leader of this meeting. And this is the direction we're trying to go. If you're trying to go over here, it's my job to politely bring you back to where we started. So I actually like that. Let's see if some other
Well,
comments.
I see something from, is it Joni?
Joni, I think so, yes.
Right. Said, what if you don't notice in the moment?
Mm.
Right. What if you notice after you've processed it? Like either way, either like that really made you feel bad,
Yeah,
or maybe that made someone else feel bad. Right. And so it is never too late to address it. Right. So going back to, like, if you feel like something might have happened in that meeting, either that you did or that somebody else did, and you, as
right,
you're thinking about and processing, you think, I bet that didn't make them feel that great. You can
right.
go back to them privately and say, in that meeting, I noticed something that didn't make me feel great, but I didn't really notice it in the moment. I was into whatever we were talking about. But I realized it after. And I want to know, how did you feel about it? Right. So you're not assuming, you're not like jumping in and saying, oh, that must have made you feel terrible. Right. You are owning it and you're asking the question and then you're opening up for a dialogue.
I love that. And you're hitting on something that I want everyone out there who is trying to practice being a great ally. I want you to know that we're not always going to get it right. And when you mess it up, it's okay. Like Gavriella just said, just go back to the person and say, this is my words, not hers. You know, I'm not proud of how I showed up in that moment. And I'm sorry, but I want you to know I did notice that. And I did not agree with that. And let me just check in on you, how you're doing. How are you doing? And what can I do to support you at this
Right.
point? I think that's so important.
And you can then at that moment, you can make a commitment, right? Next time, what would I have done? What could I have done differently in that moment that would have empowered you?
See that right there, that question right there is so powerful and could help so many people because they may actually be stunned because they don't know how to respond because they'll be like, oh, they're trying to empower now, you know? Well, actually you could do, and then they could probably come up with a couple of things. So I love that. All right. So
I just noticed Johnny. Sorry, Johnny.
Johnny.
Wrong.
Oh, is it Johnny? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So I got another set of scenarios for you. And I want to tell my audience, if you have a scenario you would like for us to talk through, please type it into the chat and we'll go there after I run through this one. All right. So now let's talk through a couple of scenarios where it's going to be important that you practice being a good ally. All right. So you witness an inappropriate joke. We kind of talked about it once before, but you're personally witnessing it now. How about this one? You're in a meeting, and while watching a video, something inappropriate comes across. What do? You experience in a meeting where an employee's ideas are not being taken seriously, or they're not even given airtime to discuss their ideas. How do you handle these situations leveraging your techniques?
Yeah, I mean, and so these are all in that A advocate, right? Because that is about putting yourself in someone else's shoes and in the moment, you know, bringing them back into the conversation in the moment, addressing whatever is going on, right? In the case of something goes on in that chat window and it may not be directed at someone else in that team, but it is directed at the group that person is associated with, right? And so as someone who is not associated with that group, it is really powerful for you as an ally to recognize that and go, I want to recognize that there's something that just happened that doesn't feel respectful. And I want all of us to recognize that it is offensive to it's offensive to me, right? Again, own it. It's offensive to me. And it is based on it's based on a unconscious bias.
Or a negative stereotype.
Or whatever it is, right? I mean, just like it, when somebody say to me, like, you're a smart cookie, right? For another gentleman in the room to say, that doesn't seem like a very respectful thing to say to Gavriella. Right? Like, did you mean to say something else? Right? Or, something like that, right? Again, not trying to get to blaming or shaming, but just creating that consciousness of it, right? I mean, I will, share my experience when I joined our transgender community as an ally. I realized there was a lot of language that I used that was offensive, and I just never realized it. And I had to I raised my own consciousness about that, right? I just the way I used to address people, I would address everybody as hey bad.
That's inappropriate,
And
right?
and I was like, okay, I need different words. And I need to find in an intentional way, I need to find different words.
Absolutely. I love that. And I'm glad to see that you are proactively joining other communities to be an ally and using it as an opportunity to educate yourself and to retool yourself in regards to how you show up in the world so that you can be more inclusive. One of the areas I want to talk about is some people think allyship is something you do in private. How do you feel about that?
No, and I think that allyship is what you do in public,
There you go.
right? Because it is about empowering people. Now, there are things that you may do in private, right? You may have a conversation, like when someone's talking, and you can tell they're really nervous. You may put in a private chat to them. Keep going. You're doing great. That's
Right.
allyship,
Yes.
right? And that is something you do. That's private,
Right.
but allyship is something that you are not afraid to do in public, right? Standing up, standing beside, standing with others, bringing them back into the conversation, giving them that power, taking your power and sharing it, giving it, taking your privilege and sharing it.
Absolutely. And I love that. And I'm also learning on my journey as I demonstrate more courage to address the issues as I see them. What I'm learning is there's this moment that everyone is paralyzed when they see something that's inappropriate. And they're all spiraling, trying to figure out, well, what should I do? And usually, what most people do when they can't figure it out and there's an audience and the audience look a lot like them, they choose silence.
Right.
They just choose silence. They're not proud of that, but in the moment, they don't know what to do.
Right.
So I think one of the things I'm learning how to do is to pay respect to the fact that they don't know what to do and then spend the time saying, but here are some strategies that you could use that would have been equally as empowering for the offended.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because I
Right.
think if we don't start creating space to have these conversations, Gavriella, I don't think we're going to move forward. Because I think what happens is everyone gets paralyzed and they just kind of stay to themselves, act like they didn't see it, or hope that it quickly passes on and we can move to the next topic. But that's not how we're going to grow.
No, I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of intentionality
Yes.
and courage to be an ally. And you have to be willing to do that. And so giving people the platform, helping them with the words, like it oftentimes is just, I don't have the words, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, right?
Mhm.
And it isn't necessarily, I mean, there is an element of, if someone's going to you know be a go to the proactive end of allyship, right? So when I think about allyship, I think the first three letters of advocate, listen, and lift, those are reactive ways that everybody can act, and you don't have to get someone's permission to do those things, right? That is, that you are listening to what they have to say, you are encouraging and lifting them up, and you are advocating in the moment on things that have just occurred, right?
Mhm.
The ones that are in the second half, right, include elevate, sponsor, where you have to proactively work with somebody. You and that person have a pact now about,
Yes.
you are going to be their ally, and you are going to be actively bringing them into a dialogue. You are going to ask them You are to ask for their opinion. You want to elevate them into new positions, into new projects, give them more visibility. Those are the things where you want to have that conversation with somebody, right? You want them to agree that they're ready. Otherwise, you could just be putting them on the spot and making them feel embarrassed.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. We've got a question. Let's go to our chat here. Do you show Reshu? I hope I'm pronouncing that up. All right. Do you showcase allyship only with your team or for your peers too?
For your peers, for your management, you showcase allyship. And so, don't think that just because somebody has a higher position in the organization, they don't also need allies,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Coaching is something that you do for everybody, right? When you reach out and you support them and you share your observations, that is something you can do for everybody. In the true nature of the word allyship, right? It often means like somebody else, you have privilege, you have power, and you are sharing it. That is not equivalent to organizational structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
People need that. You may have privilege in a situation, you may have power in a situation, even where you are not organizationally the most senior person in the room.
Right. Right. I love that. We have another question. What if you're a person who isn't comfortable with conflict?
Yeah. And so the question is, as the person who is kind of feeling like they need an ally, or as a person who may step into allyship, and I think it's different, the way that you might work yourself through that, right? Because you are not creating conflict. What you are doing is you are empowering someone else, right? And you are giving them a platform. You are helping them to be heard. You are helping them to feel valued. And so it is not about having a conflict with someone else. It's about bringing that person back into the conversation and helping just resetting the dynamics of empowerment in that conversation and in that room, right? If you're the person who is kind of feeling like you need an ally, right? Feeling like something may have been directed at you, or you're constantly being interrupted, or, geez, I just can't be heard. And you also have a hard time with addressing conflict, meaning that really just empowering yourself to come into that dialogue, then fine, recognize that you need help, and use the opportunity after the meeting to build your allies,
Mm,
to say, I've noticed that in that particular forum, I am constantly interrupted and I can't seem to say what I want to say. I'm wondering, could you give me some feedback? Like, if you were me, what would you do differently?
mm. Powerful
Right?
question. Yes.
And so there's no conflict in that.
Right.
You are seeking feedback, and you are basically bringing to someone else's awareness what's happening. Because when they come back into the next meeting, they will notice what you're saying and they will work on your behalf.
Absolutely. I also want to address the one who's not comfortable with conflict. For those of you that are still struggling to find your voice, so to have the courage to be able to even have the conversation you just had, the first thing I would have them do is to take either for those who need to write it down or type it out, make sure there's nobody in two line or anything. Put some crazy characters so if you accidentally hit send, but get the emotion out first.
Yeah.
Type it
Yeah.
exactly how you feel, anger and all, and just get it out. And then I want you to go back and say, what am I really wanting to communicate? And try to crisply describe the impact, whatever the event or the situation has had on you, and what you need as a result. And if you can at least get it in the form of writing, then you can send an email, but you have to scrub it for, maybe you need someone. Actually did this exercise with a mentee. They sent it to me, say, would you read it? Make sure it doesn't, it's not judgy or shaming anyone, but I've got to do this. I got to have the courage to do this. And so they walked this out and they typed the email. They sent the email, and the response they got back in return was so positive that it ended up yielding a conversation, one-on-one, to address the issue. And then I still think this is the most powerful question you can ask. They were asked, so what does support look like for you going forward? And in that moment, you've just built an ally.
Right.
Because in that conversation, there was an awareness that was not there before, but you allowed them to have a glimpse into the impact it had on you, and you did it in a way in which they could hear you. And for those that struggle with conflict or finding your voice, sometimes you have to do that in writing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the most powerful thing that you can do on your own behalf is to be clear about what you need, right? The way to take the emotion out of it is to say, what would it have looked like if it had been great?
Yeah.
And to talk about what that would have been and what you need to make that great. Because then you're not saying what you did was wrong, what you did made me feel bad, right? Like, you don't want to say that. What you want to say is, in that moment, I would have been more effective if I had this.
Yeah. Just ask for what you need. Here's a question, and this is probably going to be our wrap-up question. What should I do if the response after engaging isn't positive? Where do you go from there?
So if you've said somebody said something and you had that conversation or you sent that email and what you got back was just defensive or like, I didn't do that. That's not me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Which I've gotten those. I'm sure you have too, Lonnie. You have those, do you have those people, right? Who just like, they really don't get it. And so it's like, well, you know what? It could be, the way I heard it, right? The way I interpreted it. Here's what I need. Here's what would have been helpful to me. Here's what I'd like to do going forward. Right. Because it's not about, you can't go fix the past. And what you want is you just want to give them enough to start raising that level of consciousness.
Yes, that's really what it's about. And then you have some people who want to anchor on what their intent was. Well, my intent was this. And then you let them go, and then you pause and said, I can appreciate that was your intent, but let's talk about the impact that it had.
Right. Right.
Redirect.
And I appreciate that you had great intentions.
Yeah, because that's where we find ourselves. We all have the best, well, we hope that they have the best intentions, right? And we like to assume positive intent always. But sometimes, no matter how much we've planned it, it's executed poorly and it still doesn't land well.
Right.
And so it's one of those moments where you have to be willing to still talk about it. Now, I would also say there are those moments, Gavriella, and I'm sure you've encountered this, where you need to step away from the situation and say, well, they just can't hear me right now.
Right. Yeah.
Or maybe you need to just kind of gather your own thoughts and say, you know what, I need to process this for a minute because they're about to get the other side of me, and that's not going to be so positive. So let me take a step back. Let me give myself time to just think about this and think about my approach, and then maybe do another follow up.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I've had conversation with someone who said, I they just went off. Like they were like, I can't believe that you would accuse me of, being, having a bias, of saying something wrong. I am so, I focus on this. I'm, and they're just like, they went off, right?
Mhm.
And same. I was like, and I said, well, clearly I hit a hot button for you,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I'm looking for us to improve our relationship so that we can show up better together, so that I can support you and build on your ideas. And so why don't we take a time out and come back to this conversation another time?
Yeah. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do. Or if someone's just losing it, cursing at you, being totally disrespectful, call a timeout.
Yeah.
Say, obviously, this has just really hit your hot button to your point. I think we
Right.
should take a pause. We should take a pause. Let me give you some time to calm down, and why don't we revisit this at a later day? So I love that. Well, boy, where did the time go, Gabriella? We have covered
Hey, oh my
much.
God.
I told you it was gonna go by so fast, so fast. We had some great conversation in the chat. I know we're running up on time, but do you have any closing thoughts you would share with the group? And definitely make sure you anchor on your 6 points again.
Well, so, what I would say is that, becoming a great ally is a lifelong journey, and building your allies is a lifelong journey. So there's nothing immediate about it. When you find yourself in a situation and you think, I should say something, I should do something, what do I do? Think, advocate, listen, lift, include, elevate, sponsor. And I did put together an ebook that you can find on my website, where you can learn more about what those things mean, what to do. And just remember, you're not going to get right all the time. In every conversation, either way it goes, whether you're the ally or the person who needs an ally, it's not always going to go great, just like we were just talking about. But you have to have the courage to keep going because it is worth it.
It is so worth it. And Gabriella, thank you so much for creating a space to really help us understand how to be and become allies. I think a lot of people are struggling with the how. And today, I think you gave some really practical advice on how to do that. I always enjoy our time together. I know the audience has enjoyed spending this time with you. Where can they go to find out what's coming up for you next? Why don't you plug that really quick? I know you got some exciting things coming up.
Well, so it's International Women's Day coming up on March 8th. And I will be in a keynote with Thomas Asper in the Women in Technology Network. So come visit us there, and look out for some real exciting new announcements coming out. And please do connect with me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. I appreciate you. I also want to thank everyone who participated in our modern mentoring session today. I hope you were able to walk away with at least something that you can apply in your day to day. And I want to encourage all of you to just know we're not going to get it right all the time, and that's okay. But it is about us practicing and being intentional about this every single day. So I hope you were able to walk away with some important tips. And I really appreciate you for joining Modern Mentoring. And until next time, I'm your host, Lonnie Phillips. We'll make sure that the recording is available immediately on LinkedIn. Please share it with your networks. Please make sure you connect with Gavriella. If you're not connected to me, please get connected. And just make sure that you continue to support one another. So thank you for joining, and take care. Bye, everyone.